Should be here shortly. Bruce is not going to come. So we're starting a new parak, Eilu Hanisrafin. Very tough first Mishnah, at least so far. It's actually very much connected a little bit to today's, meaning Wednesday's Chumash. We talked about the first time we learned about someone being punished by Sreifa, which or to be sentenced to Sreifa, was Tamar, who was punished. The verdict by Yehuda was that she should go out and be burnt. The reason is, like Rashi says, she's the daughter of Shem. So Bas Kohen that has relations while she's engaged, and she was supposed to be betrothed to Shiloh, the last son of Yehuda. So the punishment was, when he found that she was pregnant, that she should be burnt. And of course, the whole story where Tamar then tells Yehuda that he was the man and
he's the father, yeah,
etc. All right, so this is what we bring down here over here. The Gemara says, the Eilu Hein Hanisrafin. These are the ones who get punishment by burning. Again, burning, of course, we're going to learn is not by the stake. But burning is having to swallow or what have you.
molten iron or something, right?
Yeah, very heavy liquid. So it says, Eilu Hein Hanisrafim. These are the people that would get burned. And officially, this is the official list from the Torah. Habal Isha Ubita, a person who has relations with a woman and her daughter. We'll see what the Gemara is going to analyze. What's that mean, a woman and her daughter? Bas Kohen Shazinsa, or a daughter of a Kohen who has relations. Again, obviously, if she's a Pnuya, if she's a single, we're not talking about a single daughter of a Kohen. We're talking about a married daughter of a Kohen, or engaged. And so now the Mishnah says, so that's where the pasuk teaches us. The pasuk teaches us about Isha Ubita, a mother and her daughter, and the daughter of a Kohen. Then it says Yesh Bichlal Isha Ubita, to include in the case of a woman and her daughter. There's Bitoy if he sleeps with his daughter, Ubas Bitoy, the daughter of his daughter, Bas Benoy, daughter of his son, i.e., granddaughters. Bas Ishtoi, also included in that, is the daughter of his wife. Simply put, meaning if his wife comes into marriage with a daughter. Ubas Bita, and her daughter. Ubas Bina, and the daughter of the granddaughter from the son. Chamasai, including that, is if a person has relations with his mother-in-law. The Aim Chamasai, and the mother of his mother-in-law. The Aim Chamav, and the mother of his father-in-law. So all that is included in women, a situation where a person would get the punishment of burning. So let's just see Rashi, because we're just starting the Mishnah of Eilu Hanisrafim, new parak. So basically, the laws of punishment by burning, which is like Ariel says, a liquid of iron or what is it? You said molten. What did you say it was, Ariel?
It's like molten iron that they pour down your throat, or lead.
Yeah, so like a burning lead. So in the psukim teach us about a daughter and a mother and a daughter of a kohen, which is obviously married or engaged, not single. And included in that is all variables of direct relationship. So it's a daughter or a granddaughter or a daughter of your wife through marriage, etc. Mother-in-law's mother.
Question.
Go ahead.
So I'm reading the extra print I have over here, and it says the prohibition and punishment apply both in case where a man marries a woman and then engages in intercourse with her daughter, and in cases in which a man marries a woman and then engages in intercourse with her mother.
Yeah.
What if you were, it's not explicitly stated here, so I'm just wondering, is this, if someone was to have intercourse with a woman and then afterwards marry her mother? Because that seems to be precluded here.
Yeah, there has to be an official attachment. I know there's a famous tshuva of the Nod Yehuda of a story of a Heisbacher. You know what a Heisbacher was back in the day in the shtetl when they had the yeshiva. So the boys came from all over the place, and they would stay at certain houses, and of course they were top quality boys, let's say officially. and they weren't. So everyone has weaknesses, and basically he was a good boy. The article it's a tshuva to the Nod of Yehuda, and so the host, I mean, with the house that he lived at while he was in yeshiva, wanted him to marry their daughter, and they made the shidduch. And after they made the shidduch, they're about to get married. Some way or another, it's found out that while he was in the Hoizbach, he was having relations with his future mother-in-law, the woman of the house. So they want to know what should maybe the boy himself wrote in the shaila, and he had total tshuva and everything. So I think at the end of the day, they know the Behuda let the marriage go through. I don't remember the psak, but it's not exactly the same case if they weren't married yet. But we're going to see also there's cases that are brought down. Included in that is children of rape. So children of rape, so there's no marriage there. But they're your child because you fathered a child through rape, and the same thing really included children through out of marriage relationship, where you're not married to the mother and you have a child with someone. So
the other interesting case would be in case of sperm donation or egg donation.
I have to check. I mean, that's a tough topic, and I'm sure it's discussed in halacha. That's I can't imagine there's any. I haven't studied it, but I can't imagine there's any heter to be a sperm donor according to halacha. Besides the method of getting the sperm, that's definitely not allowed.
Yeah.
But even aside for that, because of the question of the chances of ending up in a relationship like this, that's forbidden.
Yeah. I know that there are exceptions on how to do it for artificial insemination of your wife if you're unable to naturally, but I guess it doesn't go over to donation.
So in a marriage situation, of course, that there's ways that's allowed, and it's done all the time. Halachically, it just has to be done according to the halacha, and it's not so simple. Actually, interesting you mentioned it. Just a quick story. There was a couple that it's very expensive to do. I think it's like, I don't know, maybe $20,000 to get the process done, and halachic allowance for it is also very restrictive. And there was a couple that tried having kids, and something went wrong in what he was trying, and the only way for him to try to do it would be out of the laws of halacha. But if he wanted to go with halacha, he would have to do it all over again and pay the money again, and it was very hard for him. He called the Rav, and the Rav says, and I'm very sorry to tell you, but because of the halacha restrictions, maybe he did something wrong, whatever it was, that you're not allowed to. The only, if you want to continue with it, it'd be against the halacha, and therefore you have to drop this, try again. And it was very hard. He gave him the psak, and then maybe a few months later, he hears that this person his wife is expecting. He didn't judge him. He asked him what happened. So he said, actually, I'll tell you the truth. When you called me up and when you told me I can't continue with it, I dropped it, and then we got pregnant naturally. So he kept halacha, and God kicked in that case. Okay, so let's see Rashi. Rashi says, "Eilu Hanisrafin about isho bita." What the Gemara doesn't tell, the Mishnah doesn't tell us who's the isha and who's her daughter. So he says Gemara Mefarish. The Gemara will tell us what it is. Bas kohen. What's a bas kohen? So obviously, it's not just the bas kohen who has relations out, not being married. It's klaimer v'chein bas kohen shezinsa, if she has relations b'sreifa ava beula lav ava boyala lav b'sreifa. But the man who she sleeps with, he doesn't get burnt, and this we learned already in previous Gemara, that the burning doesn't include the person that's with her. The bas kohen herself only gets burnt. Yesh b'chlal isha ubita. So Rashi says, claimer. Isha ubita chsiv behedya. The Torah tells us, now here's the pasuk, so we should have the pasuk because this pasuk is going to come up a lot. The pasuk says, if those who have the side, the pasuk says that ervas isho, it's in Vayikra. Ervas isho bita. So you have the erva of a daughter and her mother, a mother and her daughter. Loi sigala, you shouldn't reveal it together. As bas bina, ves bas bita. Loi sikach. No, that's the second pasuk. The first pasuk is the first pasuk is in Vayikra Chaf. It says The ish ashayikach es isha. If a person takes a woman, ves ima and her mother, zimahi, it's called zima. The eish yisroifu, they get burnt. Oisai, he gets burnt. The eshen. The word eshen is a question. There's machlekes Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva not here. What's the eshen mean? Is it them or her? Because eshen seemingly is plural. So the eshen means them, means both the mother and the daughter get burnt. So the question is, in what scenario would both get burnt? If, for instance, the wife is his wife, what did she do wrong? Why should she get burnt? She didn't do anything wrong. If someone sleeps with his mother-in-law, it doesn't mean that the wife has to get burnt. So what's the ve'eshen? So that's machlekes Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva, and then on Rabbi Kiva there's a machlekes Abai and Rava that comes into play in our Gemara. So that's the pasuk that says a man who sleeps with the mother and the daughter, then he gets burnt, they get burnt, and that's the pasuk. So Rashi says, back to the Rashi, Yesh b'chal isho bita, kloimer isho bita chsiv behedya. The only place that says clearly the punishment of burning outside of a bas kohen is a mother and a daughter. Can the Farsh Gemara, as the Gemara is going to explain us soon. The high isho bita, and the Gemara says, what is the scenario of a woman and her daughter? Hainu chamasai, his mother-in-law is the woman in question. We'll see. It's not so simple. Then the maskana is the mother-in-law and her mother. It's not the wife at all. It's the mother-in-law and the mother-in-law's mother, which would be his wife's grandmother. Hainu chamasai the streifa chsiv be k'dechsiv kikach ish es isha vesima zimahi be'esh yisrafun. So he quotes the part for eshen. He gets burnt and them. And it says, Rashi says it's talking about the mother-in-law. It doesn't go into the details, but the Gemara is going to go into that's machlekes if it's the mother-in-law and the mother-in-law's mother. And on top of what says in the pasuk, Rashi says, from this case we learn the rest, as the Gemara is going to explain, in Gzeira Shava, all the additions that the Mishnah says, meaning your daughter, granddaughter, etc. As the Brisa goes down to explain. Bitoi, what it says? Bitoi, his daughter. What is it referring to his daughter as versus their daughter? So mianusasai, if he rapes a woman, anusasai means a rape. So if he rapes a woman, the lav bas ishtoi, it's not his wife's daughter. She's not married to him. Then it's chayiv ala mishum bas ishtoi. You can't. It's not a punishment because it's his wife's daughter, because it's not his wife. The hanusa lav ishtahi, because when you rape someone, you're not married to them, so it's a rape. So if you rape a woman and you have a daughter, when the Gemara goes through, when the Sukkim go through Vayishlach, the family Vesav, part of the family are these scenarios. So everything that the Torah talks about that seems to be like, maybe the Torah doesn't have to tell us these things. All Esav's family was made up of people like this, whether it's on the mother-in-law, the daughter-in-law. Definitely one of them was that he raped a woman and married the daughter of his rape, means his own daughter. These are all these are all who Esav comes from. Their family of Esav come from. Bas bitoy bas binoy. What's also saying the daughter of your daughter, the daughter of your son, is also children from rape. So if you have a rape and the children have children, means your grandchildren via rape. Meis ishtoy, bas ishtoy. Whether she is his daughter, bas ishtoy means either your own daughter, right? It means your wife and you have a daughter, so that's obviously your daughter. But even if she's bas churgasai, churgasai means your stepdaughter. It means she's not your daughter, she's not related to you personally, but she's the daughter of your wife. So that's also a case of in that scenario. Now, when it comes to Sheva Mitzvahs, I think we learned in the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, I think that there's something about you're not allowed to marry. We learned you're not allowed to marry your mother's. It's not even in Sheva Mitzvahs. I think it's even halacha. You're not allowed to marry your father's wife. But if it's not your father's wife, if your father raped someone, again, it's not. The Gemara calls it rape because we don't want to. Why would we? If we're talking about a scenario, why do we have to talk about that the woman did it willingly? But even out of married relationship, could you get married to someone who your father slept with? So over here, the problem over here is that it's your daughter through rape. But in the case of your father's lady, if it's not your father's wife, it's different. Okay, let's go to the Gemara. That's a different subject, different relationship issue. Okay, the Gemara says like this. Haba al Isha.
Rabbi, real quick before we start, I've got a good graphic here that
Okay,
shows all the relationships and designates which ones you get stoned versus burnt for in here. It's,
you posted?
yeah, I'll post it in the group.
Or you post it in the group, but you could post it also, there's the chat here. I think if you, I don't know how to do that.
It'll be easier just to post it.
In the group. Okay. Excellent, thanks, Shkoch. So it says like this: Habal Isha Shenase Bitay. So the Gemara says it doesn't say a person Habal Isha. If a person has a relationship with a woman, Shenase Bita, that you married her daughter. Let's see what Ariel posted quickly. Very good. So we have here, let's look at this. Shuki. Let me send it to Shuki because he's not on the group of WhatsApp. He's on the, I think it's called, what's it called? Singles?
Signal.
Signal, sorry. Hold on. There you go. Okay, so what we have here is, okay, mother of his mother-in-law, mother of his father-in-law, okay. Mother-in-law, okay, father-in-law we're not talking about here. Mother, transgender, not sure what that means here. Wife, former husband.
It's transgressor, Rabbi. That's the person who's committing the sin.
Okay, the transgressor. I was looking at that. I was wondering why would that be? Transgressor. Sorry. So he has a wife and he has two wives. Let's say he has two wives. His wife, his mother-in-law, his father-in-law's wife. Okay, so that's all be his mother. Okay, then he has his wife, and then he has a daughter and a son from his wife, daughter-in-law from his wife, means his son's wife, wife's daughter, not through former husband. Okay, then we have the former husband situation. So former husband and the wife have a relationship, they have a child. Wife's son, wife's son's daughter, wife's son's daughter, wife's daughter's daughter. And then the other one is son's daughter and daughter's daughter. Okay, so those are all the cases of burnt of our Mishnah. Okay, that's all. Where do you have stoning? Daughter-in-law is the stoning. I see.
The ones with the dots are stoning. The ones with the slashes are.
Yes, daughter-in-law is stoning and mother is stoning, and the rest are burning. Okay, got that. Excellent. Thanks, Shkoch. So here, so the Mishnah is like the Gemara is like this. Habal Isha, if a person, the Gemara is starting to analyze the Mishnah. Habal Isha shenase bita like tani. The Mishnah doesn't say Habal Isha. If you come on if you have relations with a woman, shenase bita, that you married her daughter, meaning your mother-in-law, which means that we're only talking about the mother-in-law. Elaha Habal Isha bita. It says you had relations with a woman and her daughter. Michlal de tervayu surah. Both of them are forbidden. It means the Mishnah is coming to tell us that both of them are forbidden. You're not forbidden to be with your wife. The problem here is the mother-in-law. The wife didn't do anything wrong. So why would the Mishnah, if the Mishnah was saying that you had relations with a woman who you were married to her daughter, so you're only talking about the mother-in-law. But the fact that the wording of the Mishnah is not like that. The wording of the Mishnah is Habal Isha Ubita, meaning that both of them, Tervayu, both of them are the issue here. So who in what scenario do you have a mother and her daughter that both of them are an issue? Maninu, what could such a scenario be? Chamosai ve'em chamosai. So a daughter and a daughter-in-law would be, a daughter and a mother would be your mother-in-law and her mother, meaning your wife's grandmother. So the wife is nothing. We're talking about the grandmother-in-law, whatever you want to call her, and your mother-in-law, the grandmother of your wife. Viktani. And then we learned yesh bechal isho bita miklal the tarvayu ksiv behedya v'hanach midrasha. So from here he says another thing. The fact that it says yesh bechal isho bita Michlal, from here we see the Tervayu Ksiv Hedya. That those are both what the pasuk is talking about. It means we're quoting the pasuk of Kiikach Ish Es Isha Ves Ima. Right? Those are when it says means means like this. If one would learn the pasuk, right? Sorry, my thing keeps on jumping. Ignore the hand signals here. I'm not trying to get rid of it. All right. If one just learns the pasuk itself, forget the Mishnah now. If you just learn the pasuk says, "Isha shayikach es isha ves ima zimahi ve'eish yisrafim." Right? That they get burned. Similarly, who gets burned? The mother-in-law, and this. If it's a willing relationship, obviously he didn't rape the mother-in-law. So if it's a willing relationship between the mother-in-law and the son-in-law, so they both get burned. The wife doesn't do anything wrong. It's not prohibited for her to have relations with her wife. Means you can't. There's no scenario. You say, let's say a person who had an ongoing relationship with his mother-in-law, not a one-time thing, like an ongoing relationship. So you can't say all of a sudden the daughter gets burnt because she didn't walk out of that relationship. That's surely the pasuk is not talking about that. So the pasuk itself seemingly would mean to say that the people that are getting burnt here or being punished here would be the mother-in-law and the husband and the son-in-law. So again, in the Gemara in Ksuvis, in the Gemara Sar Yavamis, is machlokes of. Sorry, I think it's we'll see here in the footnote in a second. There's a machlokes of who are we talking about in the pasuk? Yes, the Gemara. It's talking about in 76b. There's a machlokes between Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel. So it says like this. The pasuk says. Let's just go back in. So the pasuk says, "Ish ashayikach as isha as ima veish yisrafu oisay ve'esen," and them. Them is plural, and that's also them. It's not just plural. The problem with them is that because then if it would be in English, you could say plural means the son-in-law and the daughter and the mother-in-law. But because Hebrew has lashon nekeva and lashon zachar, and hen is only female, so it means it's a plural of women. So the question of the machlekes Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel is, who's the plural of woman here? So what's the ve'eshen? So that means a plural of women. So like he says over here is an apparent reference to the two women mentioned in the verse, the wife and her mother. The problem is, why would the wife be burnt, right? The Torah, however, certainly cannot mean that if a man has relations with his mother-in-law, then his wife is burnt with them. That doesn't make sense, for she committed no crime. So nor has she thereby become forbidden to her husband, that their subsequent relationship should bear any penalty. So even again, she shouldn't have to divorce him. Therefore, halachically, if she wants to divorce him, obviously for ethical reasons, something else. Therefore, Rabbi Shmuel expands the word esen to mean one of them. He uses the word esen. He doesn't use it as them. The word esen mean, but he uses the word esen, one of them. He means hen means in Greek. He says it means one. In other words, the mother-in-law. That means the pasuk itself is only talking about the mother-in-law. Okay, so that's fine. Rabbi Kiva, however, insists that esen is both of them, and he does not make it clear. Does not make clear what them refers to. So who's the them? He just says both. It's both of them, but we can't say it's the wife because if it's the wife, doesn't make sense. Why would the wife get burnt? So then there's a machlekes of Abai and Rava. Who's doing it outside. The machlekes of Abai and Rava on the opinion of Rabbi Kiva. Abai and Rava disagree. So as to what Rabbi Kiva means, according to Abaya, Rabbi Kiva takes them to be reference to the mother-in-law and her mother. So therefore, Rabbi Kiva learns the pasuk to mean eshen, them plural, is a case where the daughter and mother is not the daughter and mother in the pasuk as it simply seems to be that your wife and her mother, but your wife's mother and her mother. So you said this person's having relationships with both his mother-in-law and his wife's grandmother. So that's what Abaya says. Abaya and Rava disagree. Abaya says that Rabbi Kiva means, according to Abaya, them is a reference to the mother and her mother. Thus, the verse alludes to the burning penalty for one who has relations with his mother-in-law and his mother-in-law's mother as well, and that's that all three get burnt. Rava, however, understands that Rabbi Kiva indeed takes them to mean the wife and their mother-in-law as a simple meaning of the verse. Certainly, the wife is not executed, but the verse means that the husband and the mother-in-law are not liable to burning unless the wife too is there. In other words, she is still alive. But if in a situation where the wife has already passed away and you have relations with your mother-in-law after your wife passes away, then that's not the pasuk. Okay, so Rava basically says that so the question is, what's the machlekes of Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva? So the machlekes of Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva, according to Rava, is according to Rabbi Shmuel, he would still get burnt even if the wife passes away, and according to Rava, You only get burned if the wife is alive. If the wife is not alive, then it's not punishable by Shreifa. So it says, emerges that according to Abaya, there's no legal difference between the interpretation of Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva. They simply disagree how to interpret the verse. They both agree that the law, the penalty for relations with one's mother-in-law or with one's mother with her mother is burning. Rabbi Kiva's view, the penalty with one's mother is indicated in the verse itself, them. Whereas the view of Rabbi Shmuel it has to be learned from it. According to Rava, however, there's a legal difference between the two Tanoim. Rabbi Kiva holds that there is a burning penalty for one who has relations with his wife, with his mother-in-law after his wife's death, whereas Rabbi Shmuel maintains that there is. It means he would get burnt. Okay, so that's the machlekes between Abai and Rava in the machlekes of Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva. So now let's see how this has to do with our Gemara. Back to the Gemara. The Gemara says, Habal Isha Shenasa Bita like Tani. If the Mishnah was just telling us that a person who has relations with a woman who he's married to her daughter, means we're only talking about that woman, then that's something. Habal Isha Bita. Here we're talking about a woman and her daughter. Michlal. From here we see the Tavai Lisura. Both of them are getting punished. What could be such a scenario? It means the Mishnah is coming to teach us about a mother-in-law and her mother. And then we say in the Mishnah that when that means the Mishnah words it like this. If the Mishnah were to say, here's a list of relationships that you get burnt, so then there would be no conversation in the Gemara right now. The Gemara would ask us how we know it, and we would figure it out from the Brisa to learn the Psukim. The problem with the Mishnah, the challenge the Gemara is having with the wording of the Mishnah, is that the Mishnah divides it into two categories. That there's the clear biblical mention of burning, and that's a mother and her daughter. And from there we learn to include everything that's an extension of that. Means daughters, granddaughters, etc. Mother-in-law's mothers, father-in-law's mother, all that stuff gets included in the punishment of burning. So the question is, if the Mishnah says that we're talking about two women getting burnt, and it says that these are the two that are mentioned in the Torah, and everything else is learned from them, the question is that what does that mean? Based on what we just said in the Machlekes in Abaya and in Abaya and Rava, in Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel. So according to Rabbi Shmuel, definitely our Mishnah is not Rabbi Shmuel, because Rabbi Shmuel only says that the pasuk is only talking about the mother-in-law. We're not talking about the wife. Rabbi Shmuel doesn't say that the pasuk means the mother-in-law's mother. So therefore, our Mishnah definitely cannot be Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Akiva can be. Rabbi Akiva says the pasuk Isha Ubita means the mother, the mother, and the means Isha Ubita means the mother and her mother-in-law. Sorry, hold on a second. Let me just make sure I got this. I remember this. Them to be referenced to the mother and her mother. Hold on. As well as to the penalty for the one who, with his mother-in-law, Rav Abba understands that Rabbi Kiva indeed takes them to reference to the wife. Hold on. Rabbi Kiva Abba insists that Hein is talking about both of them, but he does not make clear who them refers to. Okay, fine. Sorry. Rabbi Kiva says it means both of them. Doesn't say who both of them are. Abaya says both of them is the mother and the mother-in-law and her mother. Rava says it's the wife and the mother-in-law. But it means to say that as long as the wife is alive, then they get burnt. If the wife is not alive, then they don't get burnt. That's the condition. So it means to say that our Mishnah that says that both women are mentioned in the Torah, both of them get punished by burnt, means that our Mishnah only goes according to Rabbi Kiva, according to the opinion of Abaya. So basically, it's a question on Rava. So according to Rava, who is our Mishnah going according to? It definitely doesn't go according to Rabbi Shmuel, who says it's only Eshen only means one person, the mother-in-law. And even according to Rabbi Kiva, says it means both of them. And both of them, who's both of them? Rava says it means the wife and her mother when the wife is alive, but we're only talking about the mother-in-law and the husband. The wife obviously doesn't get burned. So there's no mention in the pasuk about a mother-in-law. So why would the Mishnah include the mother-in-law's mother when that's not mentioned in the Torah? That's also only learned from like everything else. So the Mishnah doesn't make sense according to Rava, according to Rabbi Kiva. Right? Clear? So let's see it inside. So he says, Both of them are forbidden. Okay. So our Mishnah means right away clearly it's talking about a mother-in-law and her mother. And the fact that the Mishnah uses the wording that the pasuk is referring to a isha, a woman, and her daughter. Michla, from here is understood. The Tevayuch means to say that we're talking about what the pasuk is talking about. That the pasuk means a woman, a mother-in-law, and her mother, Bahanach, and everything else is medrasha. We learned from Exer Shava, Asya. So the Gemara says Hanichla Abaya. That only goes according to Abaya understanding of Rabbi Akiva the Amar Mashmois Darshin Ikbenayu. That Rabbiya holds that the machlokes between, it's very interesting Gemara, because the Gemara means if you don't know the Gemara of Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel, this is really seemingly the place where the Gemara should mention the machlokes of Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva, because like you have to wait until further to even understand what the Gemara is talking about. Like you had to know the machlokes already. But let's go either way. So the Gemara says Hani Chalabai. This goes according to Abai the Amar that says later in a page ahead that Mashmai Starshin Nikbenayu. That what is the machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel? What the word Eshen means. Rabbi says the actual meaning of the word Eshen. According to Rabbi Shmuel, it means only the mother-in-law, and according to Abaya, according to Rabbi Akiva, it means the mother-in-law and her mother. So that means our Mishnah means that the pasuk means the mother-in-law and her mother, and therefore our Mishnah, it makes sense that the pasuk means the mother-in-law and her mother, and everything else we learn from Exer Shava, as we're going to learn soon from the Brisa. So Masni Simani, who would our Mishnah be? Rabbi Akiva would be the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, holds Eshen, according to Abaya, means the mother-in-law and the mother's mother-in-law, the mother-in-law's mother. El Rav, according to Rama, the Amar Chamasai, La'achar Misai Kebenayu, that the machlokes between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva is if a person has a relationship with his mother-in-law after his wife passes away. La'achar Misa means after the death of his wife. So according to Rabbi Shmuel, that's still considered punishable by burning a person who has relations with his mother-in-law, notwithstanding if his wife passed away. But according to Rabbi Akiva, that's not included in the Mishnah. In the pasuk Eshen comes to teach us that only as long as the daughter is alive is this punishable by burning. So Masni Simani, who's our Mishnah go according to? Because our Mishnah clearly has to be talking about a mother-in-law and her mother, because it has to be talking about two women that get burnt. Who could the two women that get burnt mean? And it has to be talking about the pasuk because it separates those two from the rest. Means if it's just saying that they both get burnt and it's not separating, that means it's not telling what the pasuk is saying. But the fact that it separates and that these are chsiv, these are for sure, and from the rest are learned, are not bechlal what? What they're not included? They're not included in what? They're not included in the Mishnah, in the pasuk. So then, who's our Mishnah go according to Rava, right? I hope this is understood. So he says Mani. So who is it? Rava Damar. Amalach Rava says no. The only way to get out of this situation is you must change the wording of the Mishnah. And you must say the Mishnah says, Habba'al Isha, Shenasa Bita. Means your whole basis is that the Mishnah doesn't say that. Well, it must be that the Mishnah does say that. And there's a mistake in the wording. Because if we have Machlokes Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva, and he does not understand the pasuk Eshen to mean, you understand, and we're going to get to the Gemara later. You have a pasuk Eshen, them, is plural and it's female. So it's talking about two female women. For Rabbi Shmuel to say that Eshen doesn't mean them, which is the literal translation, say it's a Greek word of him, of one individual. That's not the plain word translation of the word. Eshen has to be plural. He doesn't want to learn like Rav, like Abaya. That Eshen means Rava doesn't, in Rabbi Akiva doesn't want to learn like Abaya. That means the mother-in-law's mother, because the wording of the pasuk doesn't seem to say that. The pasuk says Ish ki yikach es isha ves ima, and it's talking about a person that takes his mother-in-law and his mother-in-law. There's no mention of the wife in the pasuk. That doesn't make sense either. So it's like the whole setting of the pasuk doesn't make sense. That the pasuk tells us a person takes his mother-in-law and his mother-in-law's mother. Like, where's the wife in the story? It's not even part of the pasuk. So therefore, he says it is talking about the wife. It's talking about if the wife's alive or not. So in a sense, so therefore, Rava says he would rather add a word in the Mishnah than have to change the meaning of the pasuk. So therefore, it says that you have to say, Tani, the Mishnah says about Isha Shenasibita. We're only talking about one person, and that one person is the mother of the daughter of who you married, which is your wife. and everything else is learned from there. It means no one's arguing according to Rabbi Akiva. It means both Rav and Abai agree according to Rabbi Akiva that a mother-in-law and her mother is punishable by burning. And the machlokes is just who's the wording, who's the Mishnah, because the Mishnah's wording doesn't go according to the Shita of Rava based on how he explains Rabbi Akiva. So therefore he has to add a word in to say that the Mishnah is only talking about one woman, and that woman is your mother-in-law, and it means Isha Shinasa Haba'al Isha Shinasa Bita. You had relations with a woman who you were married to her daughter. Okay. Now the Gemara continues. Let's go a little further. Sorry, we're going a little slow because this is a difficult Gemara to understand. Actually, I want to learn the Rashi. The Rashi will just show it to us clearly. Haba'al Isha Shinasa Bita of Lake Tani. So the Gemara says claimer, meaning to say, and doing the Rashi. Midiktani Seifa Yesh B'chlal, from the second part of the Mishnah that says that outside of the initial statement of the Mishnah of a person who has relations with a woman and her mother, with her mother and her daughter, there's additional things that we learn from that. Yesh B'chlal, there's additions we add to that. Michlal, the Hay Isho Bita B'hanach Tichsiv Mayri, means that when the Mishnah says, the Mishnah separates them as two categories, the woman and her daughter, and everything we learned from that. So why would the Mishnah separate them? Only because the Mishnah is referring to what says clearly in the pasuk, which is the pasuk we quoted before. Isha yikach isha ubita. So michal dahal isha ubita b'hanech tichsiv mayri. V'lei be ishtei ubebas ishtei. We're definitely not talking about your wife and your daughter-in-law, the daughter of your wife. Ela b'chamoisa, it's talking about your mother-in-law, the sreifa. That there says clearly in the pasuk that you get burnt. Haba'al isha diktani lav bi ishtehu dimkein haba'al isha v'ima miboile. And when it says, so here's the next problem. The next problem is, if you actually look at the literal translation of the Mishnah, it seems to say if you have relations with your wife and her daughter. That's right. That's the clear indication of the Mishnah. First, it means if you just learn, if a person wishes to open up, translate the Mishnah, it says a person who gets burnt, a person who has relations with his wife and her daughter. You get burnt. The problem is that there's no pasuk for that. The pasuk doesn't say a person who has relations with his wife and her daughter. It says you get put to death, doesn't say that you get burnt. The only place of burning is about, the pasuk says, the isha ves'ima, the woman and her mother, not the daughter. Right? So therefore that's where the challenging wording of the Mishnah comes in. Means if had the Mishnah used the exact wording of the pasuk that says haba al isha v'ima, then it would be much clearer. But it doesn't say. It says haba al isha ubita. So it says a daughter, a wife, and a woman and her daughter. So miklal. So again, klaimer michte midiktani, the safe in the continuation of the pasuk of the Mishnah says yesh b'chlal. We add to that other cases. Miklal hay isha ubita b'hanei. We're talking about only the case that says clearly in the pasuk, and because it only says clearly in the pasuk, mighty, therefore it's talking about not your wife Ubasish and the daughter, because that doesn't say in the pasuk. It's talking about your mother-in-law. The Sreif V'chsiv, it says clearly in the pasuk about your mother-in-law that if you have relations with your mother-in-law, you get there's burning. So therefore, the Mishnah can't be talking about having relations with your wife. It should have just said, like I said, it should have said like the pasuk. Someone who has relations with his wife and his mother and her mother. It should have said just like the pasuk. So who could that be talking about? Who's the woman? It's talking about your mother-in-law. The woman is the mother-in-law. And if you want to say it's talking about your mother-in-law. It should just say a person who has relationships with a woman who you married your daughter. Which means your mother-in-law. Again, that doesn't say both of them are getting burnt. You can't be talking about your wife. So who could it possibly be if it's not your wife, because your wife doesn't get burnt? So it must mean chamasa, your mother-in-law, and your mother-in-law's mother. If you have relations with your wife's grandmother, oy albita, or her daughter, meaning your mother-in-law, which is your mother-in-law. And that's all what the pasuk is talking about. The question is, according to who is that the pasuk talking about? So that's machlekes. Then we get into machlekes of Abai or Rava in the sheet of Rabbi Kiva. It says, "Dahainu chamasei v'ktani yesh b'chlal isha ubita kula." And because the Mishnah says, again, Rashi says that in this is included other things, it means hanach alma isha ubita chsiv hedya. So we're talking about only the daughter, the mother and her daughter. That says clearly in the pasuk. And that question is, whose opinion is that the pasuk means a mother-in-law and her mother? The Gemara says Hanich Labai. It only goes according to Abai, but Amr Prikin that says later in the next page. God took to Rabbi Shmuel Akiva in the Shita in the Machlekes in the pasuk and the word Esen. Who does Esen, they plural female, mean in the Machlekes of Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva? So our Mishnah all goes according to Abaya. Mashmois, he says, Darshan Ikabenayu. That according to Rava, he says, Abaye says that how you learn the word esen is the machlekes. Umasik milsa, and according to Rabbi Kiva, the answer is the Rabbi Kiva ksiv behedya aim chamasai masnisimani Rabbi Kiva. So it's talking about according esen means them. According to Abaye means mother-in-law and her mother. So who's our Mishnah? Our Mishnah is Rabbi Kiva according to Abaye. El Rav according to Rav Damer bein Rabbi Shmuel bein Rabbi Kiva lechsiva el b'chamasi. We're not talking about the mother-in-law's mother, only about the mother-in-law. Misa Ishtai, that the machlekes is if you have relations with your mother-in-law after your wife passed away, and that's the machlekes pligi masnisimani. So who's our Mishnah? So Rava Tani al Isha Shinasabita the Hainu Chamasei Dechsiv Behedya. It's only talking about the mother-in-law, and it's talking about the mother-in-law who's the wife, who's you married her daughter. It means if to have a relation with a woman that you have nothing to do with her daughter, obviously is not forbidden. Ki yikach es isha the Hainu Ishtai ves ima the Hainu Chamasei. And the problem is chamasai, only your mother-in-law. Okay, so that's the first part of the Mishnah. Now we have the question: is any questions? Please cut in. Again, it's not the easiest Gemara, and you'll see from the next page, it doesn't get much easier. There's a lot of Rashi to explain all these scenarios, but let's just go a little further. The Gemara says, the Mishnah continues, it says, Yesh b'chal isho bita v'chamasai v'em chamasai v'em chama. That we say, the Mishnah says, that included in all, in the, whatever, let's say according to Rabbi Kiva, the mother-in-law and her mother, is other women. Your daughter, your daughter's daughter, your granddaughter, your wife's daughter, all that. But what does it also say? If you look at it, it says, chamasai v'em chamasai. Included in that is your mother-in-law and her mother. So why would that be? It seems like the Mishnah is a contradiction. The Mishnah, according to Abaya, the first part of the Mishnah is talking about the mother-in-law and her mother. So why do we continue in the Mishnah and say included in that is the mother-in-law, her mother? Again, if you just look at the Mishnah, simple translation, having zero background in the halacha or the psukim, it's not so complicated. Just read the Mishnah to say someone who has relations with his wife and her daughter gets burnt. Included in that is all the other cases of extension of your daughter-in-law, your wife's daughter, your granddaughter, not your daughter-in-law, your granddaughter, your granddaughter's through rape, all that, your mother-in-law, your mother-in-law's mother-in-law, your father-in-law's mother, all that is included in a wife and her daughter. But we just said that wife and daughter is not talking about the way, when it says Ishu Bit, it's not talking about your wife and your daughter. It's definitely not talking about that because there's no pasuk about that. So it has to be talking about someone that's included in the pasuk. For sure, the only one who's clearly included in the pasuk, according to everyone, is the mother-in-law. The machlekes Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva is it mean the mother-in-law and her mother, or just the mother-in-law, or the mother-in-law while the wife's alive? All the different shittas in Abai, Rava, and Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel. But the pasuk definitely only mentions clearly, for sure, the mother-in-law. So why would the Mishnah continue and say that included in that is the mother-in-law? That we were just talking about the mother-in-law. So that's what the Gemara asks now. The Gemara says, Yesh b'chal isha ubita chamasei v'em chamav. Included in that, the end of the Mishnah says, included in what we just said, is that your mother-in-law and her mother, and your father-in-law's mother. So labaya, I did the kabay lemisna, aim chamav tanina mechamasei v'em chamasei. So the Gemara says, it's not such a question. Basically, the Mishnah is repetitive. Because the pasuk clearly does not mention your father-in-law's mother. I mean, your father-in-law's mother, if you were to have relations with your father-in-law's, your wife's father's mother, that you get burnt also. So we mentioned the father-in-law's mother. We re-mentioned the mother-in-law and the mother-in-law's mother, even though that's what we were talking about before. He doesn't seem to be bothered. The Rava, I did the Kabbalah Misna Eim Chamav, the Eim Chamasei Tani Nami Chamasei. And according to Rava says that that we were only talking about the mother-in-law initially, because that's Rabbi Akiva's only talking about the mother-in-law. We never mentioned the mother-in-law's mother. So we have to mention now two women that we didn't mention before. One is your mother-in-law's mother and your father-in-law's mother. So if we already mentioned your mother-in-law's mother and your father-in-law's mother, we already mentioned your mother-in-law, even though that's what we spoke about before. So basically, the Abai and Rav are both not concerned with the repetitiveness of the Mishnah. Either it repeats two cases or one case, because it makes sense just to categorize the in-law situation going upwards, meaning mother-in-law, not daughter-in-law. Okay, let's just see the Rashi, and then I think we'll stop here, because the next sugi goes into, we didn't cover too much ground today, but the next sugi goes into how do we learn the Tanur Rabbanan is now the Brisa, which is going to go into how do we include those things? It means the Mishnah adds all these cases. The pasuk says we only have one pasuk. We'll give a little background before we start next class, and then we'll do the Rashi and we'll stop there. We learned many times that when it comes to a death sentence in Torah, there has to be two verses. There has to be a hazara, two cases, either directly or through a limud. A hazara, warning. And it means the Torah says don't do this and this, and then the punishment if you do this and this. A lot of times you have in the Gemara, we say punishment. We learned where's the hazara? Means like it says over here. We have one passage that says a person who takes a woman and her mother, it's zima and they get burnt. That's not a punishment. That's not a warning. That's a punishment. So where was the warning for that relationship? The Torah first has to say do not sleep with your mother-in-law. And the second passage could say that if you sleep with your mother-in-law, you get punished by the punishment is burning. So when we only have a pasuk without a hazara, or if we have a hazara without a punishment, we have to figure out where's the punishment, or how do we know what the punishment is? So the other cases, we all have warnings, don't do it. But we don't know what the punishment is for doing it. So therefore, the Mishnah is going to, what the Gemara is going to go do, is going to take the punishment of the woman and her mother, which is a clear pasuk in Vayikra, and the rest of the psukim that say don't have relationships with X, Y, and Z, use wording to combine them together and say a hekesh, and say that the punishment we learn from the mother and the daughter-in-law, or the mother and her mother, according to who depends who you're talking about. And the hazara, the warning, they learn from them. So they learn from each other. The warning we get from the other cases, and because it says zima, and so we go, that's what the Bryce is going to go into to try to figure out how do we put this all together? How do we include this group at the end of the day, after the Mishnah? I forget what it says in the pasuk and what's the punishment. But if we just want to know what are the punishment, like the actual chart that Ariel sent us, who are the people that get burnt? That list of people we have to go back and forth. The Brisa will navigate between the psukim to teach us how do we know that group of women and the man, obviously, besides the only time the man does not get burnt is if he sleeps with a bas kohen. But if he sleeps with any of these women, he gets burnt, because the pasuk clearly says him, oisai v'eshen, and them. So they both means both in the relationship get burnt. And how do we know to include all those people that are mentioned in the Mishnah? Means daughter, daughter's daughter, son's daughter, etc. Your wife's daughter, mother-in-law, mother-in-law's mother, father-in-law's mother. All that means, end of the day, the bottom line, all that group. How do we know the punishment is burning? That's next week. We'll learn from the psukim that come together. We're just learning this final Rashi on why Abai and Rav are not so worried. So he brings on Yesh B'chlal Isho Bita. Ktani Nami Chamasei. When we do the Yesh B'chlal, that there's the initial opening statement of the Mishnah, and then there's included in that. Yesh B'chlal means included in that. Means that the included is not what we were talking about. And then we go mention the mother-in-law. So that seems to be a contradiction. Yesh B'chlal Isho Bita Ktani Nami Chamasei. We mention clearly the mother-in-law. That doesn't make sense. It's questionable. Dahi Lav Midrash. It's not something that we learned from it. We have a clear pasuk for it. So the Abai, according to Abai, the Amar Chamasai, the Imak Sivan, that the pasuk is talking about a woman a mother-in-law and her mother, and that's what the Mishnah is talking about, just like the pasuk. Behedya, I did the ton of high klal aim chamav, because we have to add in the medrash what we learned from it. Your father-in-law's mother, that does not say in the pasuk. The asi medrash nakat agav riyato chamas v'em chamas. So we just add the word your mother-in-law and your mother's mother and your mother-in-law's mother, even though we don't need to add that because we already know it from the pasuk, and that was the initial statement of the Mishnah. And that's Rashi doesn't explain why Rav and Abai are not really bothered by it, so we'll have to just leave it that that's the way it is. All right, everyone. Again, it's a Shver Gemara. It's not going to get easier next week until we finish, I think, this sugya. I think Daf Ein Hayom and Beis is also challenging, and then Rish Hashem will get a little easier going into the sugya that we really just discussed now with Machlekes Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel. All right, everyone, have a shvut. Take care.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.